Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming here to the Avid Reader tonight. I'm James Lees, one of the event producers here. We are here to launch 9 Lives for Our Planet by John Watts. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we are gathering, the Yagara and Turrbal people. We pay our respects to elders, past, present and emerging. And I welcome any First Nations people joining us tonight, and we acknowledge we are on unceded land here in West End. So before we commence with this amazing panel conversation you're about to hear, just a little bit of housekeeping. Any of you who may be in possession of a phone, I'd like you to please set it. Oh, that was a good cue. Please, right on cue. Please set it to silent or turn it off. You're welcome to take photos though if you'd like to. If you need to use the bathroom, just head out this door here, and the bathroom's just to your right. Just head towards the light. I know that sounds a bit sinister, but if you do, you'll see what I mean. You probably noticed on the way in we have a bar, so please join us for a beverage after the event as well. John will be signing some books afterwards as well, and I do encourage you to purchase a copy of the book, which we are selling inside of the counter, and John will be more than happy to sign it for you afterwards as well. There will be an audience Q&A in the last 10 or 15 minutes of the conversation tonight. So during the conversation you're about to hear, if any thoughts or questions spring into your mind, make a mental note and you'll have an opportunity to ask that question at the end of the event. And so that's it from me. Without any further ado, could you please join me in warmly welcoming Christina Meyers, who will be leading the conversation with John Watts, Sue Higginson and Shay Dougall.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction, James, and thank you so much to Avid Reader for hosting this important discussion and launching John's book tonight. My name's Christina Meyers, and I'm stepping in for Michelle Maloney tonight. Michelle sends her apologies and wishes that she could have been here, but unfortunately she has COVID and is at home resting up. So it is my great pleasure to represent the Australian Earth Wars Alliance this evening, and I'm really looking forward to tonight's discussion. Before I begin, I would also like to acknowledge country. I'd like to acknowledge that I live, work and play on the Yagara and Turrbal people's land in Meanjin, Brisbane. I'd like to acknowledge the truly remarkable governance systems and peoples who've cared for this country since time immemorial. As a descendant of the European people who came to Australia through the British convict and colonial project, I'd like to acknowledge the ongoing impacts and legacy of colonisation. This feels particularly relevant given we are here today on Boundary Street, which was used for strict racial segregation of Indigenous communities in Brisbane in the 1800s. I acknowledge my personal commitment and the commitment of AELA to decolonisation and deepening our acknowledgement of the sovereignty of First Nations peoples and the history of our country, and embracing our responsibility to care for country and to care for each other. I would love to introduce author and retired Sydney barrister John Watts, together with 3 amazing women who he's included in his book: Sue Higginson, former environmental lawyer at the EDO and now Member of Parliament in New South Wales; Shay Dougall, an occupational health and safety therapist challenging the impacts of coal seam gas fields in Chinchilla. And we are also privileged tonight to be joined by Joe Evans, environmental activist, who's kindly offered to film this evening's discussion. John's book, 9 Lives for Our Planet, explores the personal work and dedication of 9 amazing women who have and continue to contribute to this important work. As Thomas Berry said in his excellent book, The Great Work, Our Way into the Future, the great work for humanity this century is to transform our worldview and our actions to truly understand and respect our interdependence with life on Earth and live in accordance with principles that support regenerating life. So, John, congratulations on writing this fantastic collection of stories. What inspired you to write this book?
Thank you. Before I answer that question, can I just acknowledge the work of Australian Earth Laws Alliance and particularly the work of Michelle, who unfortunately today found out she had COVID. So we wish her all the best for a speedy recovery. Excuse me. I also mentioned that I live and work on unceded Warramai country in mid-north coast of New South Wales, about 100 or so kilometres north of Newcastle. And Sue and I moved there about 10 years ago, initially part-time. I was retiring from Sydney, and initially I started going backwards and forwards and working in Sydney and being part-time in Gloucester. Now, for those of you who don't know Gloucester, it's a town of about 3,000 people, nestled in a magnificent, beautiful, what is now Green Valley. A couple of years ago it wasn't so green, but it's a beautiful, lovely area with the rivers, the Barrington River, the Gloucester River, the Manning River. And as soon after we moved there, it came to my attention through a local woman called Julie Lyford that AGL were intended to drill hundreds of coal seam gas wells to the south of the town. And I thought, this is absolute insanity. And Julie asked me if I could help, perhaps an hour a week, in helping to fight this campaign against AGL. Well, as it turned out, it was probably more like about 26 hours a day for a couple of years as we fought against AGL, who had approval from the compliant New South Wales state government to put these coal seam gas wells in. And it was during that campaign that came to my attention how many inspiring women were involved in helping us to fight against AGL's vandalism. People like Julie, who I just mentioned, Di Montague, a local woman, but certainly Jo was somebody who was also heavily involved in helping the campaign. And later on, after we managed to kick AGL out of the valley, Sue and I, my wife here, were sitting having a chat, and we were talking about the fact that there were so many amazing women who'd helped us in the campaign, one of which was Sue Higginson, who at that stage was the head of the EDO and who we went to on a regular basis for legal advice as to how we could try and besmirch the name of AGL without being sued for defamation. and other legitimate and, well, what loopholes do we have to try and kick them out was the kind of angle, although Sue will disagree with me on that. But Sue was one of the women who I thought, wow, this is very impressive, what she's doing, and her advice to us was invaluable. So when Sue and I had a chat about all this, we sat down and thought, Sue said, well, why don't you, I wrote a book after the coal seam gas fight called, what was it called, Diane? The town that said no to AGL. And it was about the fight we had. But then Sue said, well, why don't you talk about the women? And I looked around, and there was no shortage of inspiring women involved in environmental activism to talk about. And so I approached some of them and said, how would you like to sit and be cross-examined for a little while so I can write a story about your life? And that was what inspired me to do it. And what I wanted to do was to explain that activism is not a dirty word. It's used by corporations and governments to attack people who fight for the environment, but it shouldn't be like that. And activism doesn't just mean climbing up and locking onto a tree. It does mean that, but it means a lot more than that. It means, and what I tried to do is select women like Sue, who's fought legally. I don't mean everyone else fights illegally. Shay, who's been dealing with, as an OH&S specialist out at Chinchilla, to deal with the consequences of bad planning and government forcing these kind of gas fields onto people who are suffering. and Joe, who has been fighting, doing a lot of organising and so on. So what I try to do is to select women from who've been doing various different things to show that activism is a lot more and more complex than simply just locking on. So that was the reason I tried to write the book and the background behind it and the point I've tried to make.
Wonderful. And what would you like people to take from reading the book?
Well, I think I partly answered that. One thing I want people to take is from the fact that communities cannot rely upon governments to look after the environment. Those of us who've been involved, even at a superficial level, know that governments will not try and look after the environment. There are pressures on them from corporations, there's donations being made to these parties, and it's up to the communities to stick up for themselves and to fight for themselves. And unless the community gets out and works and fights against large corporations and governments, you'll end up with environmental outcomes that are terrible. Doesn't mean we always win. You know, we've had fights around New South Wales which we haven't won, and we still will lose some. But it's up to the community to get out and fight for the environment. And the other point I think I've already made is we need to do it in different sort of ways. One of the women in the book, Anne Kennedy, who's a senior grazier from Western New South Wales, who you think might, be a member of some upper class club, has been spending her life out there fighting in her way to protect the Artesian Basin, doing it not by locking on or doing anything like that, but by joining committees, writing submissions and doing stuff like that. She's an amazing woman and has never given up, but she's never locked on and has never been arrested. Her husband has. He's a grazer and he's been arrested. And people like Shay doing what they have to do. So that's one of the points I want to make.
Such an important message. Now, Sue, you're a member of the New South Wales Parliament, but you're also well known as an environmental activist and environmental lawyer. Why did you choose to go into the legal profession, and how have you used the law to protect our environment?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I too, just before I speak, I'm going to also acknowledge that I come from some beautiful country just over the other side of the border, which is Gullible country on Bundjalung, part of the Bundjalung Nation. And of course, I live, work, play and farm with my partner on unceded Gullible country. I got into the law very accidentally. It was completely accidental. A very dear friend of mine, I think I've said this in the book, haven't I?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. A very dear friend of mine who was a lawyer at the time, he had started this sort of group called Lawyers for Forests, Lawyers for the Environment, and I was a frontline activist, and we were at a blockade together, and I had, I think, a 3.5-4-year-old daughter who was wild and running around the blockade, and, we were both running around in dreads and we were saving the world together. And he looked at me and said, so what are you going to do next? And I went, what do you mean, next? Next? Is there a next? And he said, yeah, when Lani needs to go to school and all of a sudden the penny sort of dropped. And he said, and when you burn out, because you just can't kind of do this, you can't sustain this level of sort of frontline activism all the time. That said, I don't think I would have burnt out. Anyway, and I said, look, I really don't know. I haven't thought about it. And he actually said to me, Sue, you need to go and study law. And I was young and I was sort of thought, I can't study law. I barely finished high school. I'm not disciplined enough. It's not my thing. No one in my family came from the law. It wasn't what you did. I think my sister was the first in our whole family network to ever go to a uni. And he said, no, you'll love it. You'll be really good at it. Give it a go. So I sort of went, oh, okay. Went to uni, absolutely loved it. But I drove everyone mad at uni because everything I did, every law unit was, you get this oh, can you, these are your assessment tasks, or you can pick your own. So, of course, everything I did, whether it was constitutional law, contracts law, property law, it was like, can I do mine on how we would use this part of the law to save the planet? And they sort of would look at me and go,
Probate.
yeah, probate, let's do it, absolutely. You can leave in your will to any environmental charity or organisation that's on the front line saving the planet. I realised that the only reason I was there was I was learning a language. I was learning how the tools of this system how they are used. They're used to oppress, they're used to make people wealthy, they're used to service particular interests, and we needed more lawyers who would learn this language and actually try to use these tools to protect the environment. So as soon as I had finished my degree, I was sort of pretty much, it was obvious the path I was going to take, and I ended up at the Environmental Defender's Office, which I'm sure many of you would know about. It's a community legal centre that specialises in public interest environmental law, and the CEO at the New South Wales arm, way back then, kind of came and found me and said, we think you should work here. And I said, oh so do I. So off we did. It was a marriage made in heaven. And it was absolutely fantastic. But that's where, it felt like a natural continuation. But what I would say is, I suppose I knew in some ways when I went into it, but I knew fully once I was into it that it's very limited in its way and its capacity to protect the environment. There is so much about the legal system that is geared towards enabling the destruction of the environment, and so little for us to use to protect the environment. And that's why I think I probably never really ever went to sleep, because you really only found those ways, those angles, those loopholes, those bits and pieces by really agitating in your mind. And I think it was the activist in me that saw things in the law that were not easily or readily accessible to see, to be able to use those to then try to service communities, work with communities to use the law to protect the environment. It's a very long journey, but that's kind of how I got into the law.
Such an inspiring story you have, and thank you for that very comprehensive answer. Why do you think environmental activism is important, and what do you think the contemporary threats are being faced by environmental activists?
The threats are enormous. Activism is fundamental, we know that, and John's already kind of alluded to the fact, what is activism? We've really got to look at activism through the broadest possible lens. We know it's whistleblowers working in the department. We know it's WH&S experts, that are identifying problems here and how we're screwing up things. But it's also those people that lock on to things, and it's also those people that sit in tree sits. And it's activism is a very, very broad concept and definition. We know that the more activism in a democracy, the more accountable and the more mature a democracy is. The more we tolerate activism and the more we provide that space, and that space is made, even when it's messy and uncomfortable and it's loud and it may even get ugly, it's fundamental. It's what defines us as a democracy, as in one that is moving to a level of real maturity and sophistication. We know that it is actually through acts of civil disobedience, which we might say is the real kind of, however you want to look at it, but it is a particular arm of activism. Civil disobedience is responsible for so many important things that we all sit here tonight and take for granted. it's also the reason why, we've got parts of our environment that are absolutely held dear and protected. It's why we have World Heritage properties throughout Australia, which are in fact right now enormous health generators, economic generators. They're just so pivotal to the way we function as a community now here in Australia. And yet, some of those places, like I can tell you of 4 places right now that are only in the environmental condition they're in, that they have the level of legal protection they have and the level of ecological function and wellness that they have, because a bunch of ratbags rocked up one morning at 5 a.m. and stood in front of machines and said, go away, we're going to take this fight here, and we're going to take it to the pollies, and we're going to take it to the media, we're going to take it to the lounge rooms, we're going to win hearts and minds, and we're going to protect this. Obviously there's others, civil rights, etc., but environment is my expertise. Activism right now, I'm speaking from Queensland, particularly New South Wales, Victorian and Tasmanian perspective. We are on a terribly slippery slope of draconianism and, unfortunately, the gutting of our civil rights to engage in civil disobedience, assembly for dissent together, and all of those really important elements. I can talk about those in a bit more detail a bit later. I can actually give you literally a sort of 60-second plotted what's happened in New South Wales to show you how significant that slide into an awful dark place of intolerance, which is not going to serve us well. Mm-hmm. And fundamentally, we actually need to work together to turn that around.
Would you be open to sharing more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as I'm terrible, honestly. I just think I've far too much space to talk. I've got my lovely people who love me dearly just will tell me that I would speak with marbles and cement in my mouth going underwater. You would still hear me. So going back to 2014, the New South Wales Premier, Mike Baird, gave a speech in Parliament. That speech was not in Parliament like you would expect. It was in what we call the Strangers' Dining Room. It's a dining room. And that particular night, the New South Wales Minerals Council, which is the fossil fuel industry lobby, which supports coal and gas, and does a lot of seriously heavily influencing of the political and legal system. That night, the then Premier Mike Baird gave a speech to the Minerals Council saying, and we will do everything we can to throw the book at people who are protesting against your business project interests. This was the time where the community was really rising up against coal and gas in New South Wales. They were looking at their own communities, their lands, just being swallowed by fossil fuel projects in New South Wales. New South Wales at the time, the largest, biggest coal exporter, and we were digging coal and expanding coal field mines and fields and looking at doing gas like there was no tomorrow. So people were really mobilising and rising and saying, please, don't do this, don't do this. And activists were taking action. So Mike Baird absolutely commenced on that journey of making things harder. We introduced new laws to say that interfering with mines and gas fields was a serious offence, punishable by imprisonment as well as major fines. We then gave, 2 years later, we then introduced new laws creating a new offence of aggravated trespass, where you are trespassing on a business interest. So this is, we've got a Liberal National Coalition government literally serving the elite interests of businesses over communities. So that was aggravated trespass. Never in Australia had there been a trespass offence of aggravated trespass where you could actually go to prison for trespass. So, up until that point, a fine, trespass, that's what we, even injunctions, etc., but never imprisonment, just for walking on land. And then in 2019, the coalition government introduced new laws around public land and Crown land and making new offences for being on public land. And remember, one of the most important things about our right to assemble and our right to protest is this assumption that public land is our land. Of course it's our land. It's the land of the people, and it's the land that the state can't just tell you willy-nilly what to do on. It's not private land. So they started by changing particular things about public land, including things like community halls and making offences around gathering. And then we saw the most recent spate of laws in New South Wales, which is about protesting on roads, on bridges and at ports. And of course those laws are directly in response to Extinction Rebellion and Blockade Australia and so on. So that's kind of the journey. And of course, it wouldn't be complete without telling you the real part about the slippery slope that we're on. We've given the police a whole load more powers and discretion because, my word, the police need that, don't they, especially in a police state. Sorry, I'm getting a tad cynical here now. But so when you look from 2014 to 2022, in New South Wales alone, that's the kind of trajectory we've been on. Now, the interesting thing about the development of these laws has been that it's quite a slow cloaked creep, because, for example, when the coalition stood up in Parliament last year to introduce these laws, what I could not believe, as being brand new into the New South Wales Parliament, was Labor was sort of in lockstep with the coalition. So Labor, once the party of, understanding protest and rights and the union movement, because remember, this is not just environmentalists and climate activists. The union movement doesn't like these laws. They're writing every day saying don't introduce these laws.
So everyone. So Shay, your story in the book is about the issues involved with coal seam gas in your community in Chinchilla. Could you please tell us a bit about how the gas fields have changed your community?
Yes, I think what I would start with is my angle is a little bit different from an environmental angle. My perspective and where my work comes in is I'm focused on the landholders, the host farmers who are required to host this industry. So I guess a lot of what Sue was just saying rings true for the host farmers who are required to host the industry. They're not allowed to say no. It's private property. They're already running a business there, and they're required now to host this additional industry within their homes, their recreational areas, and their businesses. And I'm not taking anything away from the environment, and it deserves protection. It certainly warrants the work that's been done. But I can tell you who has no rights, and that would be the host farmers. So they're on their own. It's off their own coin that they get any investigation into what is actually going to be required of them. There is no protection under the law for the host farmers. There is protection, as little as it is, for the environment. There is an Environmental Protection Act. There is an environmental application that they must get to do their work, all considering environmental values and impacts. There is not a Host Farmer Act. There is not a Host Farmer application. So these individual people who are already trying to run their businesses are now required to become experts at the legislation that doesn't consider them and the legislation that allows them to come into their homes and their workplaces. So that's where I come in, that's my angle. And for me, it was stark when I was imported in from my busy life as a health and safety consultant, going all over went to America and England, and I had a great time, ran my own consultancy. But then I got imported as a wife into Chinchilla because I fell in love with my husband, and then I got pregnant very quickly, and then my whole world changed. But once I stuck my head outside of the nappies after a couple of years, all of our friends and families, all of our friends were being required to sign contracts to allow the industry into their homes and properties. And from a health and safety perspective, I thought that's not quite right. There's a whole bunch of compliance stuff that surely someone is looking at here. But no, there wasn't. And each of these individual farmers were really blindsided. They really did not have the information they required to make these decisions. And there was no one for them to ask, because if they had to ask a lawyer, they had to find the money. And the lawyer would only be talking about the laws that existed, and none of those laws dealt with the host farmer. It only dealt with the environment and resources. So there's a massive gap there that needs to be filled. And so when it comes to the day-to-day impacts in my community, it's about agriculture. It's about being pro-farmer. And when we're talking about activism and activists, in my community, which is the Western Downs, where it's intensely agricultural, and each of these people run 26-hour businesses on their own with their families, there's not a lot of engagement with the wider community generally. It's very hard for these people to generate a community movement. And you need information and support to do that as well, especially in Queensland. So this is the heartland of coal seam gas. This is where this agricultural community of the Western Downs has 55% of its priority agricultural areas with petroleum leases over it. So it's this industry of agriculture that feeds us, clothes us, has spent a few hundred years trying to make sure their own footprint on the environment isn't damaging. It's in their interest to be sustainable, is now being required to host this additional industry. It just doesn't coexist. Coexistence gives me the shivers. I don't like the word. It's co-location. They are co-locating another industry in someone's home and business, and there's just not the support for it. So that's my particular angle.
And given all of those concerns, what do you wish could happen now for your community? What could be done better?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to, if we're going to believe in a legislative environment that is supposed to manage things, if we're going to believe in that, then that legislative environment, that framework, must include and consider host farmers to start with. They must be included in this approach, just like the environment is required to be included to whatever degree it actually in reality is. Host farmers need an actual seat at the table. At the moment, they're not even in the zip code. They're not considered at all. So that's step one. That would be terrific. But ultimately, I think our government and our communities and the people who don't live and work in these areas of agricultural intensive activities need to be the activists, need to be the action, need to understand that this is the environment, but it's also real mums and dads and families who are having their lives turned upside down, and that we need people to be active for us, with us. Listen, know, share, ask the question, require the stuff, not just for the environment, but as well as for individuals out there who are just confronted with a wicked circumstance. I think that's what I'd like to see.
Thank you, and such an important message for all of us to come together and unite for this cause. And Jo, given you're here, would you like to answer a question?
It depends what the question is. Oh, thank you.
Would you like to come up?
Yeah, sure.
I'll come stand there. I'll come stand next to John.
John.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Joe, you are also heavily involved in fighting against coal seam gas. Can you tell us what the threats to the environment have been in your community and what your role was in relation to the campaigns you've been involved in?
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you. On the Northern Rivers, that's where I live. We beat gas, and it was a huge effort. It was a massive effort. There were so many different things that went into stopping the gas. Every aspect of the community of a campaign was within that sphere, that assembly packing. And I don't know, what do you want me to talk about really?
What happened in the community? What actions were taken? What were you fighting against?
Okay, well, actions that were taken range from legal action to community action to direct action on the ground to the science. So there's like a quad of action, and when one part of that gets tired and can't carry on, the other ones take over. And I think the problem with activism is it's such a dog-eat-dog world out there. Everyone really has to join together and realise that everyone's actions are worthy and mean something. I think what I'm doing now, I've moved away. I started with direct action, but I've moved away from that. And I've gone more into citizen science and informatics. And I find that if I can help the lawyers, or if I can help the community advocates, or if I can help the farmers, or if I can help the forest, which is really where my heart's at, is helping the forest, then that's good for me to do because I seem to be able to run into all those things quite well. I'm working on the Pilliga at the moment, and can I just get a show of hands? How many people here have actually been in a gas field? Just a couple of people. How many people have been there more than once? Yeah, I do. There's 4 of you or 5 of you maybe that have been to a field more than once. I actually think if you're going to stop this industry, you need to go and see what it's like and meet the people who live there. And I know that's a massive mission, but it's essential to being able to fight the industry. I think with the Pilliga, because it's a forest, it doesn't have deep pockets, but it is actually really essential. So I'm putting my energy into the Pilliga at the moment and having a look what's in there biodiversity-wise. I'm looking at the resource that's actually under the ground that they're targeting. So they want to get the gas out, so the gas has got to be good enough quality. It's not in the Pilliga. It's terrible. It's full of CO2. So the examination of the resource is essential because the shareholders need to know that information. Okay, there's not a lot of the farming is on the fringe, but the Pilliga is the recharge zone of the Great Artesian Basin. So what happens on that recharge zone is going to impact what goes on for other people who use the Great Artesian Basin everywhere. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. Is that okay?
That was great, and it's always wonderful to end on a positive note, and I love hearing stories of success. So what do you think other activists can learn from what happened in the Northern Rivers?
Okay, well, if you look at what happened in the Northern Rivers, you saw mass community mobilisation in a small space of time to fight, and I think that is possible in the Pilliga and on the Liverpool Plains. In regards to what's happening on the Western Downs, it just needs more attention there. And I think we might be able to fend off Arrow if that happens. On a positive note, in New South Wales, not one well drilled since 2014. And I think I'll probably end it there. Positive note.
That's an excellent way way to finish. And thank you so much to all our panellists. We are really so privileged to have all these amazing speakers here with us tonight, sharing their stories. So thank you so much.
We can do questions.
Yeah, we'll open it up to questions. Any questions from the audience?
I just can't understand how the host farmers can be forced to sign contracts they know nothing about, and they have no right to say no. And then, if there's aggravated trespass as well, what happens to their own family and friends and whatever that come onto the land?
That's an excellent question, because that when Sue said aggravated trespass, I thought, yeah, I know who's aggravatedly trespassing,
Yes.
and it is on private land, and it is the way in which the legislation is written. It is written with the desire and the express purpose of getting the gas out of the ground. That's it. There is no consideration of how or when or why they do that. So that is literally what the government requires. They require, the way they get around the finicky little thing of private property is they require the government to have a contract with the farmer. If the farmer doesn't sign the contract, the company can take him to court, and while he's at court fighting this, the company be on his place drilling. It's extraordinary circumstance. And for an individual farmer who's already running a 24/7 operation that is year after year after year having to find finer cuts to costs, then to find the time, because he now and his wife and his family now need to become experts in this overnight. It's just not possible, and that is how they're getting away with it, because there is nothing left to do but sign, and there's no one watching, there's no one checking, and there was no one there to support them fight it, and that is the problem.
And can I make this point? When you hear governments talk about these projects, they say things like, we have imposed the most rigorous of conditions on the company. We'll be watching them. It's bullshit. They don't watch them. When they were in Gloucester, one stage there was a leak, some sort of leak from an AELA well we found out about. We went to the EPA and said, how often are you coming and checking that the conditions that AELA have got imposed upon them are being complied with? And they said, look, we don't have the resources to come and check, but AELA will come and tell us if there's a problem. So that's the way they work, self-regulation, and it's the same with what happens out there. There might be all sorts of stringent regulations imposed on paper, but there's no enforcement. And even if the companies do get caught out, what sort of, they don't go to jail. They get a fine imposed upon them, which is petty cash so far as the company's concerned. So it's so heavily weighted against the individual, like the farmer and everybody and communities. It's so heavily weighted against them.
I think the most important thing to remember is that actually most of this gas in Queensland is actually going overseas. We're exporting this. This is a product that should have been phased out over 10 years ago. It's gas that Australia doesn't need, Australia doesn't use. That said, we probably would like to import some of it from Queensland to New South Wales so we don't have to open the Pilliga. But what we're actually talking about at the moment is literally just big fat profits for corporate gas companies, gas giants. And, we are actually fueling the climate crisis. That's what we're doing. And if we weren't doing this to landholders and doing it to the environment and doing it to the reserves that are meant to be in the ground, we actually wouldn't be contributing to fueling the climate crisis, and those countries that are buying the gas would actually be pushed to go further and faster in their renewable future as well. So it's like we are actually perpetuating a terrible disgrace at the moment, and the ones that will suffer the most, even more so than the landholders currently in the environment, are the kids that are yet to come, and that's what we're doing.
And the landholders' kids, who are, once the landholder signs this contract this year, that contract stays in place for generations. Doesn't get changed, can't be switched off, it's there. So it's goes with the land. So yeah, it's enduring, and yeah, that's exactly correct.
It's actually hard to fathom really how much influence the fossil fuel sector has had over every single facet of our political legal system.
We have another question. Just
Hello. Thank you to all of you for travelling to give tonight's presentation. So very much appreciated. My name's Mary. Santos got approval last week under federal Labor for 116, seems to be some debate about 116 or 166 drilling sites for coal seam gas in the Surat Basin, 500 kilometres northwest of here. So, oh dear, like it's petrol in the fire hose with a burning house. But so that's just a piece of information. There's an article up in the West Ender at the moment about it. But from what strikes me as about you is you are trusted messengers in your community, which we know is the most powerful way for community organising. So that's an incredible role that you've moved into or been drawn to. What links have you had to Lock the Gate or Farmers for Climate Action? How does that fit into your campaigning?
I spent nearly maybe 8 years being Lock the Gate's lawyer. So that's, as I've kind of serviced communities, etc., worked with, behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, and advised, helped Lock the Gate in terms of their legal strategies, attended strategic days. But now I'm in Parliament, it's a bit of a different role for me. Before that, as a public interest enviro lawyer, I think I've given legal advice to just about all of the bigger organisations and tried to help them navigate particularly strategic legal direction for where they might be heading, particularly in their sort of designs of their campaigns, and then of course, when it comes to individuals that need help on the ground. I see myself now, I've always seen myself as the person of service, like it's either legal service and now it's political representation. I've just always seen, I'm just cannon fodder. It's really hilarious because when we started about, these amazing women, all the women in that book are amazing. I'm not. I'm literally the one. No, I'm the one. I'm the one that actually just got to be with all the amazing people along the way. It's true. I'm actually the service provider, and so I think that will always be my role. Whereas others are doing it in different ways.
You're far too modest, Sue.
No,
Far too modest.
We can probably. Oh,
Sorry, we got time? Or?
Yeah.
go ahead.
That's all right. I was just going to say, in Gloucester, we had we had apart from the coal seam gas fight, we also had, as soon as AGL left, a company came in and wanted to put a coal mine within a kilometre of houses on the south of Gloucester, and that ended up being a court case again fought through the EDO, and we got them beaten, and that was great news as well. But when we had the coal seam gas fight, little community like ours, we're a bit lucky in Gloucester that there are people who moved there with a lot of skills. We had somebody who had great research skills and other people doing all sorts of things. But we'd never done this sort of thing before. I'd never been involved in this kind of campaign. I practiced law for years, but I'd never been involved in environmental law. So we called upon help from all places. Lock the Gate were of great assistance. They came down and met with us. The Northern Rivers had won their fight before us, and they came down and we had a camp, and they showed us how to set up a camp and also, but other gave us strategy ideas. So we drew on ideas from all sorts of different groups. You don't want to just fight it alone. You want to call upon expertise. And we visited Sue all the time for legal advice. So, we called upon everyone we could get help from to fight our campaign.
We can probably fit one more
I
question.
was just going to say that 116 wells is in strategic cropping land.
Yeah.
You have a question?
Yeah. And it's totally unnecessary.
I guess my question is, there's so much going on that we need to be activists against, and I'm curious if any of you have any kind of feedback on how you found the fight that you would fight, because it's sometimes I feel like by the time I've read about all the things I need to get active about, I don't have any time to get active about them, and then they just keep coming, and it's quite overwhelming. And if I'm not overwhelmed with despair, I'm just overwhelmed with the scale. Yeah, and I just wonder if you have any feedback on where you find your bit, like what you can do. Thanks.
You've got to find your strength and work on your strength, I think. Find out what you can do. I mean, I think I decided, well, practicing law for years, I had some research skills, and I used those. I had some writing skills. I became a kind of a bit of a media commentator and wrote articles for, I had some opinion pieces in the Newcastle Herald, and I communicated with Sue Higginson and tried to, make sure she knew what she was talking about. So is that right, Sue? You sure that's right? Yeah. No, it was great, but I think I was more readily able to understand the advice we were getting and implementing because of my legal background. So what I do is identify an issue which where your particular strength can be used, and do it like that. And that's what I've been doing. I write a lot of articles for a regional newspaper in New South Wales called the Manning Community News, and so I'm using my writing skills to do what I can for the environment there. Pick the fight you think you can be good at. Don't try and fight every fight.
And what you love.
What you love,
You've got to do
What
what
you
you
enjoy
love.
doing, yeah.
That was such a good question, because it is
Great question.
so overwhelming in this day and age just to open a picture, open a newspaper, open a Facebook page, whatever. You are constantly being fed this stuff. But I have to use this opportunity to keep beating on the host farmer thing and say a very dear friend of mine and Geraldine's and Joe's was, who died to this whole horrible situation, was really well known to say, if you like eating, then you need to fight this stuff. It's your problem. So, because this is happening where your food is coming from.
I was just going to say, for me, it was very much, for me, it was the forest. That's actually that's where I literally found my truth. It was about connection. It's where is your connection? And I think that ultimately is fed by what do you love? What is so important to you? And where is that connection? And where does that take you culturally? Because if it's not if the fight isn't in you and it's not part of your your sort of cultural connection with people, with the land, with each other, then that's not your fight. It's the one around the corner. Keep looking, because that's the one. For me, it's the critters.
Yeah.
It was the critters. For me, it was literally, it was rocking up to an old growth forest. I had never ever experienced anything like it. There were these ancient giant trees, and then I could not believe my eyes on the full moon night when I saw these greater gliders gliding through the night, and owls, and you could hear them and you could see them, and they were just doing their thing. And the government and the Forestry Corporation was going to destroy it all. And it was just so clear what my job was. My job that morning was to stand in front of that machine and just go, nah. And that was when I learned there and then, shit, you can't trust the government. They're somewhere doing the wrong thing. And so that leads me to where I am right now in response to what you're saying, and that is, unfortunately, the scale is really big. You look at the last State of the Environment report handed down by the Commonwealth Minister last year when she first took her role, and she gave us days of warning. It's going to be bad. It's going to be bad. We've got ourselves to a point in Australia where we really have let things go. We've really managed things really badly. And at the moment, we need big system change. And yes, remember, we changed the federal government, and that was good, and we kind of all sighed a bit of a sigh of relief. But it's not good enough. We've got to go further. Our climate target right now is not ambitious enough. We know that. I won't go into a Greens pitch. Obviously, I'm a Greens MP. But what I would be saying is wherever we need systems change. And unfortunately, government has the reins of the system. And so whatever you can do, make sure you have an electoral strategy. As well as your daily activism, make sure it also has an electoral strategy with it. Because right now we need electoral change.
That was a fantastic question to finish on, and 3 really inspiring answers. So thank you so much. Christina, I might hand back over to you just to wrap up.
It's your job. You get the easy job.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the speakers again. You guys were absolutely incredible and so inspiring. And also big thank you to the audience. Thank you for all showing up.
Yes, definitely. Thank
We
you.
couldn't have this event without you. And big thank you again to Avid Reader for hosting.
Very well.
Buy John's book.
And everyone, can we have just another round of applause for Christina Meyers, who has stepped in at the last minute and made such a great conversation. Like you got the big rock finish at the last minute. That's really great. Thanks again, everybody, and please do come inside into the air conditioning and join us and grab a drink. And I do encourage you to buy John's book too. Thanks very much.
Yeah, that's right.